Decide right now to raise your right hand. Don't actually do it. Just notice the moment you choose. Felt like that decision came from you, didn't it? From some inner self pulling the strings. Here's the problem. The scientists showed that the part of your brain that acts moves first, and the part of you that feels like it's deciding only finds out afterward. You don't make your choices. You get told about them. That sounds insane. It sounds like the kind of thing you dismiss in a single sentence and never think about again. But it came out of one of the most carefully designed experiments in the history of neuroscience. And 40 years later, nobody has been able to fully explain it away. Let's start with the man who found it. In 1983, a physiologist named Benjamin Libet was working at the University of California in San Francisco. He wanted to answer a question that sounds simple and turns out to be a trap. When you decide to move, what comes first? The decision or the brain activity that carries it out? You already know the answer. Obviously, the decision comes first. You choose. Then, your brain makes it happen. That's what choosing is. Libet decided to actually measure it. His setup was elegant. He sat volunteers down and wired their scalps to an EEG machine that could detect electrical activity in the brain. He asked them to do one tiny thing: flick their wrist whenever they felt like it. No schedule, no signal, no instruction. Just wait until they felt the urge and move. Then he added the clever part. In front of each person was a screen with a dot racing around it, like the second hand of a very fast clock. Their only job was to remember exactly where the dot was, at the precise instant they first became aware of the decision to move. So now, Libet had 3 timestamps. The moment the brain started preparing to move, the moment the person felt themselves decide, and the moment the muscle actually moved. In what order do you think they happened? Here's what he found. The muscle moved last. No surprise there. The conscious decision came about 0.2 of a second before the movement. But the brain activity, the electrical signal that builds up before an action, something scientists call the readiness potential, that started a full half-second before the movement. Read that again. The brain began preparing to move roughly 0.3 of a second before the person was aware of deciding anything. The decision was already forming. The wave was already building, and only later, after the brain had committed, did the feeling of "I choose now" arrive in conscious awareness. The conscious you wasn't the author of the action. It was the audience. Libet had found a gap, a tiny one, about 1/3 of a second. But inside that gap, the most important thing about being human seemed to quietly fall apart. Now, for a while, you could argue your way around it. 1/3 of a second is almost nothing. Maybe the timing was slightly off. Maybe the volunteers misjudged where the dot was. Maybe the readiness potential wasn't really a decision, just the brain warming up. Then the technology got better, and the gap got worse. In 2008, a team led by neuroscientist John Dylan Haynes ran a modern version of Libet's experiment, this time inside an fMRI scanner that could watch activity deep inside the brain. Subjects chose freely whether to press a button with their left or right hand, whenever they wanted. The researchers found patterns of activity that revealed which hand a person would choose. Not 1/3 of a second early, up to 10 seconds early. 10 seconds. A full 10 seconds before you feel yourself decide. There are signatures in your brain that already lean toward the answer. The conscious mind, the part you think of as you, is one of the last parts of the system to find out what's been decided. Think about how strange that is. The choice you experience as the most immediate, most undeniable proof that you're in control. I decided just now, freely. Maybe the very last step in a process that started without you and without your permission. So that's it then. Free will is an illusion. The brain runs the show, and consciousness is just a story it tells itself afterward. Except, and this is the part almost nobody talks about, the story might be wrong. Not the experiments. The experiments are real. The interpretation. In 2012, a researcher named Schurger looked at that famous readiness potential, the rising wave that supposedly proved your brain decides before you do. And he asked a different question. What if it isn't a decision at all? Here's his idea. Your brain is never silent. Even at rest, it's full of random electrical fluctuations, noise rising and falling like static. When you're asked to move whenever you feel like it, there's no reason to move at any particular instant. So the brain simply waits. It drifts on its own background noise until a random spike happens to cross a threshold. And that's the moment the movement fires. The readiness potential, on this view, isn't your brain deciding ahead of you. It's just the rising edge of random noise that happened to tip over the line. Run the experiment thousands of times. Line up every moment people moved, and of course, you'll see a wave building beforehand. You're only ever looking at the moments the noise won. It's like watching only the waves that reach the shore and concluding the ocean meant to send them. So which is it? Did Libet prove your decisions are made without you? Or did he just record the sound of a brain idling, waiting for a coin in its own machinery to land? The honest answer is that we still don't know. The most famous experiment in the science of free will has been pointing at something profound for 40 years. And we're still arguing about what it's actually pointing at. And that uncertainty is the whole point. This isn't settled science being hidden from you. It's a genuine open question, sitting right on the border between your biology and the deepest thing you believe about yourself. But here's what hasn't gone away. Even Libet, the man who started all of this, didn't believe he'd killed free will. He noticed something else in his own data. Yes, the action began in the brain before you were aware of it. But there was still a window, about 1/10 of a second, between the moment you became conscious of the urge and the moment the muscle actually moved. And in that window, people could stop. They could cancel the action. Libet called it the veto. Some people call it free won't. You may not get to choose the impulse that rises up inside you, but you might get the final say on whether you act on it. Think about what that means. Maybe free will was never about generating every thought from scratch. Maybe it's the quieter power sitting at the end of the chain, the ability to say no to a wave that's already rising. So go back to the beginning, back to your right hand. When you decided to raise it, something in your brain may have started moving before you knew you'd chosen. The wave may have been building while the conscious you was still catching up. For 1/3 of a second, maybe 10, the decision belonged to a part of you that you will never meet, and then it reached you, and you felt it as a choice, and you called it yours. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But the strangest thing of all is this. You will never be able to catch the moment it happens. Every time you try to watch yourself decide, you arrive a fraction of a second too late, just in time to take the credit.